All right, everyone, welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 8 recap. Another good week in the books. All sorts of stuff happened this past week. Lots of controversy, I think. However, unnecessary and or unfounded, I think it might have been. But it spiced things up a little bit. Got people pretty fired up. So that's always good. But um, let's see. Things didn't quite work out too well, though, well, as was predicted before anything actually happened. It was assumed that it was known what was going to happen. I think, if anything, should come from the quote unquote controversy of last week's trade, which I still think was silly. Um, it's that you really don't know what's going to happen come Sunday, come game day. So to get so bent out of shape about something, really, when I think a lot of times you, just like I said, you don't know what's going to happen, and I feel bad for Josh for getting thrown under the bus and ridiculed and harassed for being so stupid, and then he ended up winning this week, and maybe this will be the point that turns his season around, and he makes a charge here for the playoffs. I mean, who knows? Anything can happen. So we'll see. Let's see. The only other thing I can think of is that Josh did request that after our trade, that maybe I would show him a little bit more respect in the recaps. So we're going to do that this week, whether you guys like it or not. So, let's see. How should I go about doing that? Let's see. Oh, okay. I think I got it. Uh, we're going to get into the first matchup here with the defending champions, the Josh Field Hayward Topes, going up against Joshco. And this one was won by Joshco over the Hayward Topes. The final score, 166.2 to 157.2. A 9-point margin of victory here. Couple pretty close matchups this week. We had a couple that were not close at all, but a couple that were pretty close. So it made things interesting here. Let's see. Quarterbacks for the Hayward Topes, we had Jameis Winston with 36.6, and for Joshco, Andrew Luck, 2 points ahead, 2 points higher, 38.5. Wide receivers for Joshco, he had DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, and Allen Hurns. Hopkins, 8.5. Thomas, a little over 12. Hurns, 22.8. So Hurns leading the way there for your wide receivers. Looks like about 30, 33, 34 points from your three wide receivers. While the Hayward Topes had Brandon Cooks, Marquise Lee, and Robert Woods, thanks to some injury problems and bye week problems here with the wide receiver core. Had to kind of piece together something. Some wide receivers with some injuries. Wasn't sure if Woods was going to play. Cobb was out. Lots of problems there, but what can you do? Let's see. Cooks, 14.5. Lee, 1. And Woods, 9. So about 25 points from the three wide receivers there. Running backs, Joshco had Ezekiel Elliott and Jaquiz Rogers. Zeke had 96 yards, and Rogers had, 69 and a touchdown. So you got about, 22, 23 points from your two running backs, while Hayward Topes had LeGarrette Blount and DeMarco Murray. Blount, 40 yards and a touchdown. Murray, 123 yards and a touchdown. So that was about, 22, 23. No, sorry, 33 points from the two running backs there. Let's see. Tight ends, we had Jordan Reed versus Kyle Rudolph. Jordan Reed just under 25, while Rudolph 8.1. And flex spots, we had Spencer Ware versus TJ Yeldon. As we all know, Spencer Ware got hurt in the first half, went out with a concussion, never came back. He only got 6.7, while Yeldon had 9.6. Kickers, we had Crosby for the Hayward Topes and Bailey for Joshko. Let's see. Crosby, 1 field goal, couple PATs. Bailey actually looks like he had a couple field goals, couple PATs. Let's see, it was about 6-12 in favor of Bailey there. While defenses, let's see. We had Kansas City versus the Denver Broncos. For Joshko, Denver Broncos did pretty well. Yahoo says 28. I think it was maybe 31 or 33, something like that. Pretty good score. They had a couple turnovers. One was, I think, an interception returned for a touchdown, or maybe it was a fumble, one or the other. It doesn't matter. And they won the game, did pretty well. Kansas City also did pretty well. They had 6 sacks, a couple turnovers, didn't give up a whole lot of points. Yahoo says 18. I think it was more like 27, if I remember correctly. So actually, pretty good matchup there in terms of defenses versus each other there. So up and down the lineups, obviously it was a close game. So I think everything was pretty close, except for the receivers in favor of Joshko there. I think Alan Hearns almost, if not, he pretty much outscored the entire Hayward Topes receivers by himself. So that swung things in favor there, while, let's see, although Jordan Reed did pretty swing things towards the Isotopes there at the tight end position, a couple, just the little things that swung it over here to Joshko in favor of him. And both teams were 3-4, trying to get to 4-4. And obviously Joshko gets there. He is now in 6th place, while the Josh Field Hayward Topes, they dropped to 3-5, and they are now in 8th place. Next matchup, we had some Huber on Huber action. Ugh, I don't think anybody really wants to see that, except maybe Josh. And let's see. So we had the new Josh, Mad Haywards, going up against every Joshy Ertz, and new Josh, Mad Haywards, took this one down. Final score here was 186.45 to 153.65. New Josh's, he had Derek Carr go absolutely crazy this week. He had, he had 40 completions, over 500 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 85 points. Somehow he did not break the single player record as far as I know. I know Drew Brees had, I want to say, 95 points 1 week last year. So I'm still trying to figure out how he only had 86 with that ridiculous point total. But I do believe that is the 513 passing yards is the highest total that we've seen, at least in accurately recorded history of Tonto's demise. Which, unfortunately for every Joshy Ertz, he got a great performance from his quarterback, Carson Palmer. Just over 63 points. So, great matchup here between the quarterbacks. Unfortunately for every Joshy, he went up against a career day for Derek Carr. Let's see. Wide receivers. New Joshes had Alshon Jeffrey, Doug Baldwin, and Larry Fitzgerald. Jeffrey, 16.5. Baldwin, just over 9. And Fitzgerald, about 17.5. So you got about 42, 43 points from your 3 receivers. While every Joshy Ertz, he had Crabtree, Brandon Marshall, and Pierre Garcon. So he had Crabtree here on the end of Derek Carr, but unfortunately it didn't pan out into a little bit more points. I think you would have hoped for maybe one or two of Derek Carr's touchdowns to go to Crabtree. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. He still got 18.8, which is pretty good. Marshall 10.8, and Garcon, 12.7. Pretty good score there. So about 42 points from your three wide receivers. Running backs, New Josh's had Melvin Gordon and what's his name? Is it DeAndre Washington from Oakland? Gordon had 111 yards. Washington had 32. So you got about 17.5 points from your two running backs. While every Joshy Ertz, he had Devontae Freeman, who actually, he had 2 touchdowns, one rushing, one through the air. Although it's not showing his rushing stats, so I'm not sure exactly what his total was there. But Mark Ingram, I don't know what happened to him. I don't think he got hurt. He must have just got benched or something, because I don't know if it was his very first carry of the game, but he fumbled it away. And he actually ended up with getting you minus 1.5, because I don't remember. So he had 5 rushing yards and the fumble lost. So that was pretty much it. And I don't think he went back in the game for some reason. Like I said, I'm not sure if he was injured or if he was just benched after that for some reason. So not much you can do there. If that that was a great game. Pretty good game for the Saints offense there. Could have made a difference here in this matchup. It was a 30-point margin of victory here, but if you think about it, if Crabtree had gotten maybe 1 or 2 of those touchdowns and Mark Ingram had actually gotten to play in the game, things could have possibly been a little bit different here in this matchup, but that's not what happened. So, a boy can dream, right? Every Joshy can dream for a different result, but you get what you get. All right, and tight ends, we had Antonio Gates versus Jimmy Graham. Gates doubling up Graham about 13.3 to 6.4. Flex plays, we had Terrell Pryor for New Josh's, while every Joshy had Will Fuller. Pryor had 18.1, and Fuller, ugly game for Fuller here, only 1 catch for 23 yards, so 3.3 points from Fuller. Kickers, it was pretty even here from Hopkins and Hauschka. Each one looks like they kicked 2 field goals and a couple PATs. Each one had about 8 or 9 points there. Defenses, New Josh's had Philadelphia. They did okay. They ended up losing to Dallas. I think Yahoo says 5. It was right around there. It actually might have been a little bit less, because I think they gave up a ton of yardage, and they lost the game. So, and then every Joshy had Houston. They won. They had looks like they only had 1 sack, but they did give up a decent amount of yards, I think. Yahoo says 7. It was definitely a little bit more than that, but it was not enough to get past New Josh's Matt Haywards, considering he got, of his 186.45, the 86 there pretty much came from Derek Carr all by himself. So pretty much when that happens for you, the rest of your team just has to kind of show up and maybe get a little production there, and you're probably going to get a victory. So you got 100 points between the other 9 players on your roster there. So, which is about 9.5 points per player there. So, yeah, that's pretty much it here. For the matchup, every Joshy Ertz would have liked to see maybe Crabtree catch one or 2 of those Derek Carr touchdowns. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. You didn't have Tevin Coleman. He was hurt. That might have played a difference here in that shootout between the Falcons and the Packers. And yeah, Ingram not he ended up with negative, like I said, he ended up getting you negative points. So those are probably the biggest difference makers here in this matchup. Let's see, New Gods Mad Titans. He moves up to 5-3. He is in 5th place, while everybody Ertz, he drops to 3-5. He is now all the way down to 11th place. All right, our next matchup, we had the man himself, Kibbles and Vix, Mr. Josh Hayward, going up against the Dub Josh Haligans, and Kibbles and Vix takes this one down. Final score here, 159.85 to 149.15. Let's see, Dub Josh was ahead going into Monday night by a pretty decent margin, about 22 to 25 points there, something like that. But Kibbles and Vix had Stefon Diggs and Zach Miller, who were able to cover the deficit and then some, with the 10-point margin of victory here for Kibbles and Vix. Let's take a quick look at these lineups. Quarterbacks, we had Kibbles with Tom Brady, just over 58 points, while Dub Josh had Drew Brees with about 50.5 points. So pretty close matchup there. Both going over 50, pretty good. Wide receivers, Kibbles had Julian Edelman, Jeremy Maclin, and previously mentioned Stefon Diggs. Edelman, 13.5. Maclin, pretty much the same thing, 13.3, while Diggs was at about 21.5. So Kibbles got about 48 points from his 3 receivers, while, let's see, Dub Josh had Emmanuel Sanders, Golden Tate, and Jordan Matthews. Sanders, 10.8, Tate, 11.2, and Matthews, 23.5. It was there was somebody else who did it too. I can't remember who it was. Maybe I'll see it as we go along here. But Jordan Matthews, he had 11 catches. How do you turn 11 catches into only 65 yards? I mean, that's what, 5, a little over 5. Well, just almost exactly 6, I guess. 6 yards per catch. I mean, here, again, another close matchup, only a 10-point difference. If you see somebody who has 11 catches, I could understand. It would be a lot more common for his his receiving yard total to be like 165 and not 65. So that might be the biggest difference in this matchup, I would suspect. That he only said 11 catches, but only 65 yards. Kind of surprising there, but overall, for Dub Josh's 3 receivers, looks like he had about 44, something like that. Take a look at the running backs. Kibbles had Latavius Murray and Theo Riddick. Murray just under 50 yards rushing. Riddick, not sure exactly what his rushing stats are. It's not showing up here. Looking at the Yahoo recap, but he did catch a touchdown. Let's see. Yahoo says 27, and I did have to cut. Almost 16 points from your total score here, thanks to his Riddick not being in a flex, so you didn't get his receiving stats. So it looks like you must have gotten about 11 or 12 points from Riddick there. While Dub Josh, he had Lamar Miller and Devontae Booker from Denver. Miller, 56 yards and a touchdown. Booker, pretty much the same thing, 54 yards and a touchdown. So pretty even scores from those two guys. So let's see, about 11 and 11 each. So you got about 22, 23 points from your 2 running backs. Tight ends, we had Martellus Bennett versus Zach Miller. Miller doubles up Bennett, 7.5 to 15.8. Flex plays, Dub Josh used another tight end. He used Barnage, who got 7.2, while Kibbles played Adam Humphries, from wide receiver from Tampa Bay. he got 8.8, so pretty even there. Kickers, Dub Josh had Bryant, and Kibbles had Vinatieri. Looks like Bryant had several field goals and several PATs and a couple field goals, while Vinatieri only had 2 PATs. As for defenses, we had Dub Josh with Arizona. Let's see. Looks like they only had 1 sack and 1 turnover. Lost the game, gave up a lot of points and a lot of yards to Carolina there. I think Yahoo says 7. I think that was actually correct, if I remember properly. While Kibbles had Cincinnati, as we know they played to a tie, so that was neither +3 or -3 there for you, but they did give up too many points. They gave up a ton of yards. Looks like they had 1 sack, 1 turnover. So Yahoo also says 7 for them. It might have been a little bit more than that, thanks to because I don't think Washington had a whole lot of rushing yards. They may have not. I don't think they went over the 150 barrier, but I'm pretty sure that Cousins was definitely over the 225 there. So, but it was enough for Kibbles and Vicks, I should say, to get the victory there on Monday night from his Stephon Diggs and Zach Miller. I almost said from his Vikings, but they are on 2 different teams there, Diggs and Miller, obviously. So again, 10-point difference here. What was the biggest difference in this matchup? To swing it in favor of Kibbles. Really, it's pretty much the quarterbacks here. 58-50. That pretty much covers the difference, looks like Kibbles' wide receivers edged Dub Josh's just a little bit, and that was the difference here. And so, wow, let's see. I think kickers swung things back in favor of evened it out a little bit there for the matchup, but like I said, Zach Miller doubling up Martellus Bennett all made the big difference here. So, for Dub Josh, it wasn't enough. He drops to 4-4, still in 7th place. Not too bad. Still, no reason to lose hope for the rest of the season here on your playoff chances. While Kibbles and Vicks, he moves up to 3-5. He is now out of the basement. He is actually up now in 10th place. Our next matchup, we have FC Hayward versus From Josh to Haywards. And this one was won by From Josh to Haywards. Final score, 157.4 to 129.3. Another tough break for FC Hayward this week. I think Ty Montgomery found out he wasn't playing pretty much at the last minute here. Some injury problems here for FC Hayward. Bye week problems too. No Odell Beckham Jr. As C.J. Anderson, he went down to injury. He's done for the year, I believe. Michael Floyd, couldn't use him. He's I think he played, but he was hurt. Didn't really do too much. Let's see. Well, let's just take a look at the matchup here. Quarterbacks, FC had Matt Ryan versus from Josh to Haywards, he had Andy Dalton. Matt Ryan wins this one. Looks like 55-48. Still 2 pretty good scores, 2 pretty good quarterback scores there. Wide receivers from Josh to Haywards had Demaryius Thomas, Julio Jones, and Devontae Adams. Here was the other wide receiver that I was trying to think of before Devontae Adams. Demaryius Thomas, just under 13 points. Julio, just under 6. Surprising game there. I think he was injured, but trying to play through the injury for most of that game. Kind of opened things up for other Falcons players in that game, but definitely, well, fortunately for Josh to Hayward's, didn't cost you the victory here. Then we had, again, Davante Adams, who had 19 and a half, but he had 12 catches, but only 74 yards. So that's about, again, like 6 yards a catch. You'd like to see 12 catches and 174 yards more often than not with that kind of total. It's just very strange that two wide receivers in the same week had over 10 catches, but still well under 100 yards receiving. It's and no touchdown. Well, I think Matthews did have a touchdown, but still, just very unusual to see that happen. As for FC Hayward, his 3 wide receivers just was a desperate piecing together, again, wide receiver core for this week. A trio, I should say. He had Tyrell Williams, Tyler Lockett, and Cordarrelle Patterson. Just cobbling something together and throwing it out there this week. Williams 1.4, Lockett 7.2, Patterson 6.6. So Davante Adams covered that all by himself there over FC Hayward's 3 wide receivers. Probably the biggest factor here in this matchup to swing it in favor of Josh Hayward's. Running backs, we had Frank Gore and Chris Thompson for Josh Hayward's. Thompson looks like he only had 14 rushing yards, while Gore only 37 rushing yards, but he did catch a touchdown pass, so that counts for you. You got about 10 points from him, so about 12 from your 2 running backs. While FC Hayward, he had Gillislee and Zach Zenner. Zenner, only 2 rushing yards, so less than a half a point there. But Gillislee actually did okay. Recently traded for him. Needed somebody to plug in this week. He had 85 yards and a touchdown. So that's 14 and a half points there. Pretty good. So you got about 15 points from your 2 running backs. Tight ends, we had Cameron Brate versus Travis Kelce. Kelce, a little bit more than doubles up the tight end here, Cameron Brate. Seemed to be a trend here this week with tight ends doubling up the opponent here, as Brate had 11.2 while Kelce had 23.1, so a little bit more than doubling up. Flex spots, we had FC Hayward with James White, and let's see, Rashard Matthews, Tennessee receiver, for Josh Hayward's. White just under 5 points, and Matthews actually just under 14. So pretty big difference there. Kickers, McManus versus Santos. Looks like McManus made 2 short field goals and a couple PATs, while Santos looks like he had a couple field goals, couple PATs. Looks like the score there was about 8-12, 8-13, something like that. So 4 or 5 point difference there. Defenses, we had Tennessee for FC Hayward. They did pretty good. A couple turnovers, a couple sacks, won the game, but they did end up giving up a lot of passing yards. Did pretty good on the rushing staff. So I think, if I remember correctly, the total was 20. Yahoo says 8, but I think it was 20. While New England, they had 2 sacks. Did pretty well. Let's see. I don't think they gave up a whole ton of yardage. Yahoo says 5. I don't think it was too much more than that, but still a decent score. So it was enough to get the win here from Josh Hayward's. Let's see. I would have to say we had about a 27, 28 point difference here. So the biggest factors were definitely the wide receivers there. Like I said, Davante Adams pretty much outscored FC's 3 wide receivers all by himself. And while all the running backs were pretty even there, it was Kelce doubling up Cameron Brate and Rashard Matthews almost tripling up James White there, 5-14. So that was the biggest difference here in this matchup, to swing it in favor of from Josh to Haywards. He moves up to 5-3. He's now in third place, while FC Hayward, he drops to 2-6. He's now in the basement at 12th place. All right, next matchup, we had the Battle of the Podcasters. We had Hayward Squasher going up against the Joshua Haywards, and Hayward Squashers wins this one by a pretty significant margin. Was it about 96, 97 points here? Final score, Hayward Squasher 218.5 to the Joshua Haywards 121.7. Let's see. The 218.5 said we actually had two teams go over. I think the previous high for this season was held from Josh to Haywards. He had, I think, 216 early on in the season, like week 3 or week 4, something like that. So we actually had two teams top that total this week. This was the first one, the Hayward Squasher, with 218.5. So let's get right into the matchup here. Obviously, it's going to be the totals are going to be pretty lopsided. Quarterbacks, we had Cousins versus Stafford. Cousins just under 71 to Stafford's 43. Wide receivers, Hayward Squasher, he had Amari Cooper, Jordy Nelson, and Willie Snead. So, actually taking a quick look at this, thinking about it, Hayward Squasher, all he really needed was Kirk Cousins, Amari Cooper, and Jordy Nelson. He could have benched everybody else on his team and still would have won this week against the entire Joshua Hayward's team. So, pretty disappointing if you are the Joshua Haywards this week. Let's see. Amari Cooper, he had 38.5. Jordy Nelson, 19.5. Snead, 11.5. So what is that? About 30, 68, 69, close to 70 points from your three wide receivers there, which obviously is 70 from the quarterback, 70 from the receivers. That's already, like I said, more than the 121 that the Joshua Haywards were able to get, which I'm taking a look here at Joshua Hayward's roster. He had way too many single-digit scores. That's not going to get you a win. And it's also, I should mention, not going to keep you alive in the knockout pool, as this week we say goodbye to the Joshua Haywards. Just to be specific, it actually is the DeArmonds, the Detonators. Don't want to have that come back and say, well, actually, it wasn't knocked out. It wasn't me. It was the Joshua Haywards. So, anyway, Joshua Hayward's wide receivers, they were T.Y. Hilton, Marvin Jones Jr., and Mike Evans. Hilton, 3 points. Jones, 6.3. And Evans, an even 11. So that is about 19. So Jordy Nelson scored the same just by himself as the Joshua Hayward's 3 wide receivers. And that's not even counting, said the 40 points from Amari Cooper. So, running backs. Oh, let's see. Hayward Squasher, he had Jonathan Stewart and Gio Bernard. Stewart, 95 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, while Bernard tacked on 52 yards and a touchdown. So that ended up being, about 22 and 11, 33 or 34 points from your 2 running backs, while the Joshua Haywards had Ryan Matthews and Alfred Blue. Ryan Matthews did score a touchdown, but he only had 10 rushing yards, while Blue only had 41 rushing yards, no touchdowns. So you got about a little over 11 from your 2 running backs. Tight ends, again, here in favor of Hayward Squasher. He had Tyler Eifert coming back for the first time this year, and playing a huge factor in this matchup. He had 25.2. He was over 100 yards and a touchdown. Just as Gronk was, he was over 100 yards and a touchdown. He had 21.9. The only difference here was Eifert had 9 catches versus Gronk's 5. So makes up the 4-point difference there. Flex players, Hayward Squasher put in Greg Olsen. He only had 2.1. It was a battle of Carolina Panthers here. Olsen versus Benjamin. Won by Benjamin. Even though, let's see, Olsen caught 1 pass, while Benjamin only caught 2. But Benjamin's 2 went for 73 yards. So he got you about 9.5 points there. Kickers, we had Folk versus Janikowski. Janikowski looks like he made 1 field goal and a couple PATs, and he did miss several 50-yard field goals. Fortunately, it didn't really matter because this matchup was over pretty much as soon as it started. So it didn't matter if what Janikowski did there. Folk looks like he had 1 field goal and a couple PATs. It was about 6-4 there in terms of kickers, while your defenses were actually fairly even. Looks like we had Seattle versus Detroit. Seattle actually lost the game, but they did have a fumble for a touchdown. That must have been Mark Ingram there. I can't remember if he actually did, if that was his fumble that went back for a touchdown or not. But so Seattle actually, even though they lost, they actually did okay. As for Detroit, looks like they had a couple sacks, 1 turnover. They did lose the game. Didn't give up a whole lot of yards, though. They did okay. Yahoo says 12 for them. It was probably something like that. Pretty close. Usually whenever your defense loses, it's going to end up being pretty close to what Yahoo says. Because the score, I mean, they probably gave up a lot of yards if they lost the game, so it's going to be fairly close. Plus, you're losing those. The points that you lose for the loss are usually made up there somewhere in there by the yardage that was allowed. Quite often, it's going to be the rushing stats. Especially, like I said, especially in a loss, a lot of times you're going to see that your defense gave up too many passing yards. But if they can stay under, 150 yards rushing is still, that's a pretty high total. So you usually, even if you lost, you usually can make up those couple points from your rushing stats. Usually, but I mean, probably more than half the time, but not obviously, not always. So I think that's pretty much it for this matchup. The Hayward Squasher, I believe this is now his 4th win in a row, something like that. He's on a big roll here, and he is actually all the way at 6-2, and he jumps up to 1st place with this win. While the Joshua Haywards, he drops to 3-5, and he is now down in 9th place. Again, and he is also eliminated this week from the knockout pool. And final matchup, we had, like I said before, going over 200 points and actually setting the highest score of the season so far. We had the Josh T. Hagits going up against Josham Hajic. Blah. And Josh T. Hagits, actually, he won this one. The final score, 223.1 to 142.65 for Josham Hajic. Let's see, quarterbacks. We had Aaron Rodgers versus Tyrod Taylor. Rodgers about 65, while Taylor, he was about 39. Let's see. Wide receivers, we had Josh T with Allen Robinson, Jamison Crowder, and Dez Bryant, while Josham had A.J. Green, Anunwa, and Cole Beasley. All right, Allen Robinson, 13. Crowder, 25.5. And Dez Bryant, about 21.5. So, looks like about 60... about in the low 60s from your two, blah, I'm getting lost in the numbers here, trying to do it up here. So I'd say about 62, 63 points from your three wide receivers. Excuse me for that little moment of confusion. Let's see. As for Josham's three wide receivers, he had AJ Green, again, Enunwa and Beasley. Green, 21, Enunwa, 19.5, Beasley, a little over 9. So it looks like you got about just about 50 from your three wide receivers. That's pretty good, but again, not enough this week. Running backs, Josh G had Matt Forte and Niall Davis. The Niall Davis, who's already been passed around to a couple of teams since Sunday. He's no longer a Packer. He was signed by the Jets. Apparently, he's no longer a Jet now either. Feel bad for the guy. He'll probably just end up back with back where he started with the Kansas City Chiefs here, maybe. But let's see. He only had 4 rushing yards, but Forte made up for it here with 82 yards and 2 touchdowns. So you got a little over 20 from your 2 running backs, while Josham had Christian Michael and Robert Kelly, I think, from the Redskins. Michael, 40 yards and a touchdown. Kelly, 87 yards and a touchdown. So you got, 10 and 14. About 25 points from your 2 running backs. Tight ends, we had pretty even matchup here. It ended up being Delaney Walker versus CJ Fedorowicz. Walker, 11.8, and Fedorowicz, 15.3. Pretty good score there. That's one of the only places, I think, here where the Possum won. Let's see. Next up, flex plays. We had David Johnson versus Dante Moncrief. Another matchup that was fairly even, a little bit in favor of Josh D here. David Johnson, looks like he had no touchdowns, but you had to have him in the flex here because he only had 24 rushing yards, but he had over 15 points from receiving stats, while Moncrief looks like he had 4 for 40 and a touchdown, and even 14 points from him. Kickers, looks like Josham actually had minus points from his kicker, as Lambeau had 1 PAT, no field goals or anything, but he also missed a field goal and he missed a PAT. So he got you -1. While Josh D had Sturgis, looks like he had a handful of field goals, 2 PATs. He was up over 13, probably closer to 14, 14.5, something like that. While next we had Carolina versus Minnesota. That was Minnesota's defense was the only thing left to go here in this matchup for Monday night, and definitely a surprising outcome here, I'd have to say, because it's a good thing for Josham Hajic that this matchup wasn't a closer or was coming down to that Monday night matchup, because surprisingly, the Minnesota Vikings defense, they only got you 1 point. Only 1, which is very unusual for them. They gave up too many rushing yards, too many passing yards. They lost the game. They only had 1 sack. So the points given up was balanced out by the -3 for the loss. So all you got points for was that 1 point for the sack. Very surprising outcome, I'd have to say, in that matchup. And let's see. As for the Carolina Panthers defense, they won the game. They had a defensive touchdown. Looks like they had 8 sacks. They did really well. I think they only gave up, like I mentioned a little bit ago, David Johnson only had 24 rushing yards. So they were definitely under 50 total for that matchup, which is 9 points there. Yahoo says 26. So I think it was a lot more than that. It was probably closer to 35-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. So, so this one wasn't even really close, unfortunately, for Josham Hajic. And the 223 is a new, at least for this season, it's the highest score we've had so far. Said not much that Josham could do in this matchup. he was outscored pretty much everywhere except the tight end position. So with battling injuries and some bye week problems here, Josham Hajic, he's only 5-3, still doing pretty good. Hey, he's still in second place, so nothing to complain about there. While Josh T. Hagitz, he is now 5-3, and he is in fourth place. All right, that's pretty much it for week 8 here. Just take a quick look here forward at week 9. I think it was Gags that mentioned the beauty of the symmetry of our current standings, and gotta say that he's right, as we have the standings are being bookended by a 6-2 and a 2-6 here, and then we have 4 teams at 5-3, 2 teams at 4-4, and 4 more teams at 3-5. So it's all even there. Like I said, the symmetry is nice to see. What else? Matchups here. We got another week of good matchups. Said Possum and Gags, 2 5-3s going at each other. Disco and Dub C, they're both 4-4, trying to claw their way back up. Dub C, he's up against the Isotopes, also trying to claw their way back up. So that's an important matchup for both teams. Disco, he's got a tough one going against the Mighty Midgets. Let's see. We got Everybody Ertz versus Twerkin. They're both 3-5. They both need this win. Whoever loses here is going to be pretty close to being on the ropes here in terms of any playoff chance, because one of them's going to drop to 3-6. We got a powerhouse matchup: Huber Squasher versus Huber. The Jimmy Huber, New Gods Mad Titans. One's 6-2, one is 5-3. One's in first place, one's in fifth place, but only a game behind. So, gonna be an interesting matchup there to see what happens. Can the Huber Squashers get knocked out of first place after 1 week, or will New Gods Mad Titans jump up there? Will Possum Magic be able to jump back up and take first place back from the Huber Squashers? I don't know. It's going to be a pretty interesting week here, as still no real. We got a tough matchup here for FC Bahorik and the Diarmans. Probably going to be changing his name back to the Detonators. If FC loses, he will have the the dreaded 7 losses here, which would pretty much eliminate him from playoff contention. If the Detonators can knock him off, he would probably be the first one that we would be clapping out here. But still, everybody else, 11th place is only 2 games behind second place here, so these last couple of weeks are going to be important. It's hard to believe we only have 5 weeks of the regular season here left to go. So pretty much everybody is going to be biting and clawing and scratching their way here to try and get into a playoff spot. Huber Squashers, 6 wins. They're pretty much in the best position here to make the playoffs. It would take a total collapse. Pretty much the Huber Squashers would have to lose every week here from here on out to not make it. So that's, however, unlikely. Probably going to happen there for him. We have 4 teams with 5 wins already. So the teams trailing with 4 wins or 3 wins, these are still important weeks. Anybody said 5-3, a couple losses here, drop to 5-5. You could have some people move up to 5-5. So nothing is really guaranteed yet. The teams near the bottom there, Detonators, Isotopes, Disco, Dub C, even Twerkin here, and Everybody Ertz, they're going to be fighting. They're going to fight till the end, I think. So we'll have to see what happens here. The matchups are going to be interesting. It's going to be tough all the way down, probably into the final week, which I think is this the first week that, or the first year that I can remember where we have bye weeks in week 13, last week of the regular season. They almost never extend that late, which is kind of strange. I don't remember it ever happening before, but that happens this year. So I think there's only like 2 teams that are off that week, so it doesn't make too much of a difference. But it is interesting that they're having the bye weeks go that late into the season. Anything else interesting that I can think of to talk about here? Like I said, the Detonators are eliminated from the knockout pool this week. That leaves only, let's see, the Isotopes, the Dub C Hooligans, the Possum Magic, and the Huber Squashers, I think, are the only teams left here. So, what else? Another interesting thing I saw, they were talking about, thanks to the Alex Smith concussion, kind of an interesting little tidbit here, that apparently some people in the league are in the NFL, not in Tonto's demise, of course, are trying to push for that any player who even appears to have a concussion to be taken out of the game and not even allowed the possibility of coming back, which is an interesting proposition, especially for fantasy players like us. I mean, I understand that the health of the actual football players is the top thing in mind, but it would be very difficult, I think, to justify any player who even appears to have a concussion, whether he takes a hit to the head, whether he actually does or not, to be said he could be taken out of the game with no possibility to return. That seems a little excessive to me, but and if you, I think, and they're making a fuss about Alex Smith, but if you saw any of that game, he did take a shot to the head. He had a cut on his ear, it looked like, but he passed the concussion protocol, and they put him back in the game. For some reason, they were having him run more other rushing plays for himself, and he actually, if you look at the play where he did get a concussion on, he was sliding, and the defender who came up, he actually, as Smith was sliding, put 2 hands on the side of Smith's helmet and basically slammed his head into the ground. I think he wouldn't have actually hit the ground, except this guy's hands, you can't tell, it happened so fast, if it was intentional or not, if he was just, trying to push him down to the ground, which, first of all, it's a quarterback, and he's sliding. You should know not to put a hit on him like that, but his hands basically hit Smith's helmet and knocked him, and basically smacked his head off the ground, which is what caused the concussion here, the definite concussion. So that's another interesting thing. Hopefully that doesn't actually end up happening, because that can make a lot of tricky situations here, especially for fantasy players, where what are you supposed to do? If you've got a player who just gets hit in the head, and they decide, even though he's fine, they decide that they're going to take a look at him, and if they change the rule here to give him no possibility of coming back into the game. I mean, that's going to start. That could possibly. I'm not saying this is just something that they're apparently talking about. Not saying it's actually going to happen, but I mean, it would leave you as a fantasy player holding your breath and just hoping that none of your players take any headshots, because they're going to go out of the game and not come back here, and that's going to affect matchups. And again, I totally understand that they're trying to do what's best for the player safety, and I understand, but it's just, hopefully that doesn't actually happen, because I just think it would cause a lot of problems here, not just for football, but for fantasy here. Anything else? I think The only thing really that I had to mention about the trade between me and Josh last week was, again, I feel bad for Josh for getting said he pretty much got trampled on by everybody else, and obviously things worked out favorably for him and unfavorably for me, which is just the way it goes. You probably, like I think I said before, you really have no idea what is actually going to happen, and I think the only thing that really I had a problem with was people were saying that that I was probably lying about having trade offers and things like that. But and if there's one thing that I will tell everybody that, and I think Detling has kind of mentioned it before in the past. I don't know if it was in podcasts or other places, but talking about like playing poker and stuff like that, those in the days, and how being how tight I play poker or whatever like that. But the thing that I learned from those days playing poker was that the thing I learned and was able to actually come to terms with is that I am a terrible, terrible liar. I will admit it. So I don't do it. So when I say that I had a couple trade offers, it's absolutely 100% true. I have no reason, and I'm not gonna I'm not gonna lie about it. And you might not believe me, but pretty much I'm gonna give you the truth on that kind of stuff because I just said I'm a terrible liar, and I've come to terms with that, and so honestly I just don't do it. I mean, because let's face it, lies they just make problems, and I think we all know that. The more you lie, the more you have to maintain that lie, and really, it's just easier. It's the lazy way to just not tell any lies, because then you don't have to remember that kind of stuff, keep track of it. So I think that's the only thing that kind of bothered me about it, but it's over and it's done. I really had no problem with it. I understand why Josh took it, and he was willing to roll the dice. Other people thought that it wasn't worth it, that the players were too far different in value or things like that. You really don't know. Uh, let's be honest. On paper, it may look lopsided, but that's still, like I said, that's just each person's entitled to their own opinion. Who knows how things are going to play out over the course of the regular season? You don't know, I don't know, so we just do what we do, and hope that it works out the best for each of us. So hopefully that's the last we have to hear about that. Well, and the only other thing is I should probably said with Spencer Ware trading for him and then him getting hurt. It seems like it seems like for me that's always what happens. Even though I very rarely make a trade because most people just won't trade with me, and there's people who I just don't even bother trying to trade with because I know that they don't want to trade with me no matter what. But when I do make some trades, it seems to always work out against me. So I think I actually would have been better off if I had just stuck with my team and maybe played the guys that I had here and not. Even though I don't know where I'm going with this, so it doesn't really matter. And I don't think anybody cares. Am I right? I'm probably right. So let's just finish this because people are probably tired of listening to all this nonsense and me complaining about stuff. So nobody wants that. So, all right. We are heading to week 9 already. Going to be some good matchups. Whatever happens this week could have some that we could start to see the playoff pictures maybe come to light here. Like I said, if we get a couple more teams who get to 6 wins, which is a possibility here for New Gods, Mighty Midgets, and either Possum or Gags are going to get to 6. So once that could be at least 3 or 4 teams there to 6, which pretty much you're knocking on the door of a playoff spot there. So, and of course there's only 6 playoff spots, so that's going to be 3 or 4 teams already pretty much occupying 4 of those spots. So it's going to be, so the playoff picture might be a little bit clearer here after this week or next week. So that's usually how it plays out. People are going to be fighting for those last couple spots here pretty much probably all the way till the end of the season here. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. All right. That's enough. You guys are probably like, shut the hell up already. Okay. Yeah, week 9. Good luck to everybody, and we'll see you back here again next week. All right. Thanks, guys.